And Prabhupada accepted.
But the strongest presence I remember when I first met Srila Prabhupada was in Golden Gate Park. It was in 1966, or 66 or 67. I was standing there, and everyone was out. Hayagriva was playing trumpet. Somebody had kettle drums. There were gongs and cymbals, and incense was burning, and Prabhupada was leading a kirtan in, I guess it was on Hippie Hill, or a hollow over there in the Haight-Ashbury, and in Golden Gate Park. And he sat there chanting, and I'd developed some sort of psychokinetic powers because of lacking anything better to do with my energy. And I used to be able to play pinballs and move the ball around and do stuff like that, you know. So one of the things I used to do for pleasure, and it was sort of a interfering demoniac, basically, sort of pleasure, was looking at people when they weren't looking at me and making them turn around. So I thought I'd try that on Srila Prabhupada. Well, we didn't call him Prabhupada back then. He was called Swamiji, or the Swami. And I thought I'd make Swamiji turn around. And I stared and stared and stared, and nothing happened. And I looked at a bunch of other people that were standing around in the crowd, and they turned around very fast, just as though a bee had landed on their neck, you know. And I stared at Prabhupada again, and it didn't happen. I began to be very alarmed, and something inside of me became very determined, and I said, I am not going to leave this place until Swamiji, the Swami, turns around and looks at me. I want to know that I've made contact with him. And it ceased to be an issue of this ego control of wanting to make someone turn around, but I just wanted to make contact. And I went on and on. I kept on amping up my energy until I was breaking out in a sweat, and nothing happened. He was simply chanting, and he looked very ethereal, sort of as though he were floating in some sort of cosmic amniotic fluid, you know, and he was his kirtan, and he was moving flexibly and just totally unaffected. Finally, whatever energy in me that wanted him to turn around began to plead and actually beg. And the minute I became very sincerely begging, all of a sudden his eyes floated around to the side, and he looked at me, and it froze me for a moment. His eyes looked as though they were like whale eyes or dolphin eyes, floating in nowhere, some sort of golden light, and they were looking at me, and they hovered there for a moment that seemed like eternity, neither beckoning nor rejecting, just observing. I stood there, and my whole system collapsed from the inside out, and I just stared, and I said, oh my God. And all sorts of confusing emotions ran through me at that time, and I was standing there with a girlfriend, and I wasn't, you know, I was sort of, you know, a hippie-styled person. And outside, I was very confused. Inside, I had an overwhelming thought. I must go and straighten myself out and go to some place where I can really think things through, because I'm not ready to become his disciple yet. My first impulse was to become his disciple.
Then Haridas decided to paint the Panchatattva, but for some reason he thought they were women. It was very different then. And so they were in Hawaii or something, and so he painted them with breasts, the Panchatattva. And so when Prabhupada came in and the new painting was unveiled over the new altar, the eclectic altar, Prabhupada he actually said, at Haridas, and said, those are men, not women, and so please change it. So he changed it. So it was really quite open in the beginning, and it's really an amazing thing how Prabhupada was so patient, and he just introduced things very slowly.
When the Swami would walk into the room, into the storefront to give the class, everyone would bow down. I saw others doing it, so I started doing it. This is in the very beginning. But Gargamuni wouldn't. He was the only one. He would just sit there. And this was going on for some time. And but Gargamuni, I think, felt a little self-conscious about it. After class, Prabhupada would always ask for questions. So, on one occasion, then Gargamuni, he raised his hand and asked that, the others, when you come into the room, everyone bows down, but I don't bow down, and because I don't feel like bowing down. So if I don't feel like doing it, I'm not going to do it, because then if I did it, it would be artificial. So I want to be more real, and I'm just explaining to you, and if this is all right. So Prabhupada looked at him and said, you should bow down. And by bowing down, then the feeling will come. So this is a very nice instruction. And of course, he started doing that. And it worked.
In the early days, the temples were so used to Prabhupada's personal association, and I might suggest that Prabhupada's association, particularly in the early days, particularly in a small temple, was so galvanizing that when Prabhupada was there, he was like a magnet, and everything else was like iron filings. Everyone knew how to act, everyone knew what to do when Srila Prabhupada was present. All things fell into place. It was very simple to be a devotee. It was very simple to be spiritual. If he said, this is how to cook dal, suddenly you became empowered to cook dal. If he said, this is how you chant, suddenly you were empowered to chant. If he says, get this building, suddenly you got this building. All you had to do was have enough suspension of disbelief to go ahead and do it. And by Prabhupada's direct kinetic personal presence, it happened. So we were so used to that, and then if he told people to work together on something, never mind they were enemies 10 minutes before, they could work perfectly together. It was very much like the lion lying down with the lamb, or Lord Chaitanya going through the Jharikhanda forest. Suddenly everyone spoke the same language, and it was very easy, because he took away the ego barriers that made it impossible to see the higher self, and to see the relationship with Krishna, to see his relationship with Krishna. All in all, people talk about channeling. Prabhupada was continuously channeling Super Soul. Therefore, he was channeling the source of everyone's well-being. Everyone's answer was coming from Prabhupada, because everyone's answer is ultimately coming from Super Soul. So that when you saw Prabhupada, he was like the main branch of the bank. He had it all. He had all the information. So everyone was so used to that when Prabhupada went to another temple, everyone tried and tried and tried to maintain the standard. But being what we were, it gradually would sink down like silt in the stream. And then when Prabhupada came back again, all of a sudden it was all excitement and everything worked again. So in those days, we always managed that Prabhupada would go from temple to temple to temple and keep them all revived.
I would photograph a lot, so sometimes he would tease me and he'd say, why are you photographing me so much? Photograph something important like people chanting. And actually in San Francisco he teased me again. He said I was photographing a lot. I should have had one of those motorized drives or something. But I was just photographing. But it's because his mood changed so purely. So he said, there's a superstition in India that if someone is photographed, it will shorten their life. Or he might have said shorten their longevity. What do you think? And I stopped. I was shocked. I was photographing and he said, shorten your life. He said, what do you think? And he was looking down at me. And so I said, well, I think that it's how someone uses their life, not how long it is. And he says, yes, that is just a superstition.